All right, welcome everyone. All right, welcome to a new tutorial where I'm gonna be going over how I put together this black color reveal for this Redmi phone. It's very heavy on the lighting and on the animation, both camera and the cubes. I used a lot of time remap here, so that's gonna be a very interesting subject to talk about, as well as a lot of exclusion and inclusion when it comes to the lights. I didn't prepare this scene very much. I did not get rid of much of the materials that are kind of useless. I didn't really organize the objects up here, but definitely gonna do that for the version of the project that I'm gonna upload to my Patreon. So if you would like to open the project on your end and explore it in your own base and maybe reverse engineer it or take from it anything you like, feel free to check out my Patreon. It's going to be in the description, and I'm definitely going to have this up there. All right, so I haven't prepared any scripts. It's not really script, but just key points. So I'm just gonna try to keep it very simple. I'm gonna try to keep this under half an hour, unlike the CPU tutorial that I made, which I kind of started babbling too much. Probably was too boring to follow, so I'm gonna try to keep this a little bit shorter and more to the point. So first things first, did not model the phone at all. And I'm not really interested in teaching modeling. I think there's plenty of guides out there for that, and it's a very monotone thing. I don't really like modeling things in 3D, so, but I definitely know how. I know like the basics, and so if I ever need to fix something that's not really working correctly, by the way, this is a step file. The client provides the smartphones in a step file format pretty much all the time. And what I use to, there's a software called, I think, Modo. I think it's called Modo. It might be this one. I'm not sure. But this is, I think it's this one. It could be some other, there could be other programs that do the same thing. Anyways, not really interested in explaining that too in depth, but the main materials here are, the glass is pretty straightforward. The sides of the phone, maybe they're worth explaining. So let me just pull up the way, press S to go exactly to the object that you have selected. And it seems like I have a material that I dragged to the scene from the asset browser materials. So this one is called plastic rough. So it should be plastic rough. I think it's this one. But you don't have to rigidly use it. You can modify it however you like, which is what I actually did here. I think I got rid of all of this additional stuff and I only used the bump map, which is interesting, but I think that's the only thing that I really needed to get those fine details. So yeah, the bump map. You add a Maxon noise, I believe. I don't know if this is a Maxon noise or just a regular noise, but you can see fractal, and then the overall scale 20, scale 100, to basically scale it down so that it's just very light, rough surface. And the other thing that I want to explain about the materials is this glass surface. So there's one thing that's special about this, and that's actually something that was in the real phone. with the reference that we got was that this glass is not normal. It basically would reflect these kind of rainbow colors around the sides depending on how the light shines on it. So as you can see here, it's blue shades and green, and here it's orange. You can notice it more obviously when you watch the actual video. But basically how I did that was dispersion. So full transmission, I didn't use any roughness, so it's very clean, very glassy, but pump up the dispersion to 13.79, and that got me the result that I liked. Also the IOR is 1.2. Not really sure why I didn't use a more common value. I think it's because 1.2 brought out the rainbow colors a little bit more. So definitely something that you want to experiment with, but I don't think that's going to be the focus of most people watching this tutorial. You're not really going to have this specific phone to work with, so those are just the two unique things about this phone model that I thought I would get to. These cubes, this follows the same reference that I used for the CPU, which the client wanted translucent cubes moving around in the environment. That's just the vibe that they wanted to go with, and so that's what I did. And they're pretty much, as I explained in the CPU video, just cubes. Let me actually go over it again. It's very simple. Press C, get to the edges selection, select all of your side edges here. Bevel, drag, and that's it. You've got a block with curved radius in the sides. Actually, this has a name, but I forgot what it's called. Someone wants to remind me in the comments, perhaps. Most important thing that I want to talk about, lighting first, and then we get to the animation. So the lighting, so there's a ton of lights that I used here in this scene. Basically, the main purpose was to show the glossiness of the back of the phone. So here I used a very sharp regular area light, and I placed it in a way that when the camera moves up, you can see that it sort of slides along the Redmi logo, which the Redmi logo uses a metalness value that is like 0.5, 0.6. So it's this is kind of the result that you would get from that usage of the material. Let me see if I can just select it here and show you exactly what I mean. Just a second. If I can just figure out the exact material that I used, put this back. Yep. Oh, it's actually one. So this is the material that I used for the logo. So it's very reflective, especially when there's a light that moves across it. The surface that reflects the light is going to be way wider than the rest. And that's kind of what metalness does. You see, if I drag it back to 0, it's going to be way flatter, and it's going to be way harder to notice that difference. And then this is simply just following the reference of the actual phone in real life, how it looks. And then there's another area light, but this one has a gradient. So this one has a gradient to it. And the way I was able to do that, if I can find it, this is very messy. I think it's this one. I think I used Grayscale Gorilla's area lights, HDRIs. It's technically not an HDRI, it's just a texture, but yeah, it's included in their HDRI pack, which I got a subscription for like a month in Grayscale Gorilla, but it was a little bit too expensive to just kind of stay subscribed. So I'm gonna wait probably until we have some Black Friday deal or something. But it's very valuable, and I still use their HDRIs. Pretty sure that's not a problem. But I might not include it in the Patreon thing because I don't want to resell it. But you can actually just get rid of it. And let me show you another way that you can do that. You can add graph and then come here to the material editor, or just double click this. Actually want to go to open the node editor for this shader graph, and you're going to look for ramp, drag it in the scene, plug the out color to the general color here, and we can play with the ramp to try to recreate that. The same ramp that we had in the Grayscale Gorilla thing. Yep, so this is very close. Obviously you want to spend a little bit more time messing with it. I'm gonna save incremental. And I made it so that this area light is at an angle, as you can see, 216. I think if I put this back into 0, okay, so it's not even that one. Let me try to find which area light is that. This one. And yep, that's very crazy rotational values. I think the reason why the rotation doesn't change is because I included a target, and it's targeted towards the phone. But if I just delete that and I set the rotations back to 0, we're gonna lose it. It's not even shining on it anymore. So it can be quite tricky to get a light to face the objects the whole time. So that's why I use the target tag. It just makes things a lot more easier. You can do that by right clicking, type target, and you're gonna find it here under animation tags. Let me control Z all the way back. And one thing that I want to mention about this rotation of the phone, and I think actually I might have made a mistake here, and I did notice it in the render, but it was a little bit too late to fix. This does not look really that good. There's some very overexposed parts. And that's probably because of the materials here in the bezels. Let me try to find that one. So maybe if I brought this down to 0, it wouldn't look that bad. And then you have the front camera. That's definitely way too oversaturated, overexposed. I mean, not sure exactly why. Okay, that's not it. But you get the idea. I'm not gonna make this too long, bothering with this stuff. Not really that important. So I'm gonna put the glass back. I think I have a roughness on it, which might be what made it kind of look a little bit too off. So if I put that back to 0, yeah, that might be a little bit better. But what I would do is, for example, I don't want, this light looked good on the back of the phone, but I don't necessarily want it to appear here at the front. So what I would do is I would first of all figure out which area light that is. If you're more organized with your project files, then you're definitely gonna find it way easier to find. And when you find it, you can go to project, and as you can see, I've already excluded some of the objects that I didn't want to the light to affect. So basically what this does is, if I click on this teardrop here and I select the front screen, you're gonna notice that the light doesn't shine anymore on the screen. There's no reflection for this specific light, even though it's still on. And even though when you look at the back of the phone, it's still there. So what this tells it is, it tells it, okay, you're gonna ignore these specific objects in the scene. We're gonna pretend in the render like there's no light there that's shining on them. And that's gonna help you just clear up the scene a little bit so that there's less of those strong random reflections. This is something that I'm not happy about either. There's a lot of these frames where there's a lot of changes happening with the lighting. I think it would be much cleaner if I just got rid of those, either by keyframing them or again adding them to the exclude option. But sometimes it's going to be a bit more tricky to get right. And then at the very end, it's just the same ramp lighting, area light. It's just an area light that is at an angle, and it settles into place. Again, just to show that the back of the phone is glossy. This was very important for the client. This was not even the first revision, so this was added later on. But that's completely fine. And as you can notice also with the background, when the video starts, the background is pretty much almost pitch black. And then towards the end here, it gets brighter. I believe that's just the dome light that I'm using here, which is this one, which actually uses another grayscale Gorilla HDRI. But I turned the saturation down so that it's not too blue, just to match the black color reveal. And I must have keyframed something here for sure. Okay, so I keyframed the rotation, so that pretty much the sun, which is gonna dictate how bright the HDRI is, I just keyframed it so that towards the end of the animation, it's gonna sort of come into close to the frame so that it basically gets brighter. I could have just done it with the intensity. Maybe if I start with 0.1 and then I keyframe it to 0.2, it's sort of gonna have the same effects. But that's just happened to be what I did back then. And that's pretty much it for the lighting. If I had to go through actually everything that I did here for the lighting, every single specific dome lights and the area lights and what I excluded, you're going to see some of these have exclude, some of them actually only include certain things, like the dome light for the lenses. So this gave me more control over the reflection on the lenses. So if I get rid of this just temporarily, just so that you see what I'm talking about, and let's region render it. Let's also get rid of these out of the way. as you can see, the lenses have a very specific reflection on them, and I'm fully in control of it, and I do that by excluding them from most of the lights in the scene, and then I create a new dome light and I include them. And when you choose include here, it's basically only going to affect these objects that are here in this menu. So this HDRI, this dome light, only affects the lenses in the scene. And it's just an HDRI by Grayscale Gorilla. You can play with the saturation. I could have made them way bluer. You could even play with the hue. Get any sort of look that you want. As you can see, this also works. But it definitely can look a bit too amateurish if you go overboard with the colors. So I would probably tone down the saturation a little bit, just so that it blends more with the scene and it doesn't look too unrealistic. But at the same time, when you watch the video, you can obviously, your eyes are gonna go to the lenses because they're they have like this unique reflection, unique colors on them. So I think that's gonna be it for the lighting, because we still have to talk about the animation, which is probably the most complicated thing so far in this project. So gonna get rid of the render view. We don't really need it to explain the animation. We do need the F curve, so I'm just gonna put it here. Let's just get rid of this, push that all the way there. We don't need much of these things. Okay, so what did I do? We can start discussing the camera first, then we can get to the cubes and the phone. So the camera, if I can find it in this mess, is simple RS camera with a target that is a null, and that's actually the null that it's targeted towards. I'm just gonna rename it RS cam focus points. And basically both the RS camera and the focus target are animated, so both of them are animated. I believe maybe I can demonstrate it by just removing these keyframes for now, and you can see how the camera is gonna work without the null animation. So that's purely the camera. And then what I did was add this focus point and I animated it. And you can see how it behaves here. It's gonna go up when I want to reveal the camera. So it would be the Y position of the null that goes up. And then towards the end, the null is actually moving towards the middle of the scene. I think it's guided by position Y. No, that's the depth. One of these. Okay, well. Interesting. Okay. So I'm not really sure why I added these curves. I think if I delete them, it's not going to change anything. Yeah, so the repositioning of the phone to the left is probably, I have to assume that it's the phone itself moving in 3D space. And I think I'm right. because of maybe one of these keyframes is gonna reveal something. No. Okay. This one doesn't move either. Okay, it's been months since I opened this project or dealt with it. I know I used that excuse in the CPU video, but that's just the truth. I don't remember exactly 100% everything that I did, specifically what moves here, so I don't know how this gets, how the phone moves from the middle of the frame to the left. Okay, there it is. Okay. So that's a null that basically has all the cubes and all the lights that affect the phone and everything, and it basically just moves over to the left. Because if you go to the Xiaomi Ilia's YouTube channel where this was officially released, they have the sales text here. It says the name of the phone, where you can buy it. So I had to move it out of the frame during this last bits so that they could fit that text in there. So yeah, going back to the camera, let's see if I missed anything. Just basic keyframes. You know, you keyframe the end position, you keyframe it at the middle where you want it to be, and then you keyframe it at the start. As you can see, there's a fast move here, and then it gets slow, and then it's fast, and then it gets slow. And that's just the time remap that I put in this scene. So basically what a time remap is it's a function, it's a C4D curve that goes from 0 to 100, and that's basically the timing of your scene. And you can manipulate the curve however you wish, and any curves that have the retime assigned to them are gonna be affected by the curve. So that's gonna be that in itself is a separate tutorial. So it would take a bit of time to explain exactly how it goes. If I might be able to explain it really fast if I take a cube and let's say keyframe there, and then 30 frames, keyframe there, F curve. This is the default movement of the cube, right? Ease in or ease out or whatever it's called. Let's go with the linear movements, okay? So the movement is very linear here. And I'm gonna create a new null. I'm gonna keyframe the render visibility just so that it shows up in the F curve, and then I'm gonna right click it, add special tracks, time track, and there you go. So this is gonna go from a value of 0 to 100, and 100 is gonna be placed at the last frame. And we can actually take this. This is basically how the scene's timing plays out. So as you can see, it's linear. Now, if I make it more of a ramp curve, the cube is still going to move linearly because this timer map has not been assigned to the cube animation. So what I would have to do is I would have to click on the cube and drag this time to the time track here and then release. And now you're going to see that the cube moves in a speed ramped way. And I used this method here because I really did not want to come here and manually change every single position, every single rotation, and try to match the speed ramps so that it does not look weird, so that No, one curve is dominating over another. So I just kind of tried to keep the movement here a bit more linear of the camera. And then I left all the speed ramping to be done in the retime curve right here. And that was actually very successful. It takes a bit of trial and error to get things right, make sure that it's smooth and enjoyable to watch. But I think I reached a pretty good result. Now, as you can see, most of the scene, if not all of the scene, has the time remap assigned to it. Yep. I think it's assigned to everything that has a keyframe. So that's the way I did the speed ramped camera moves. Obviously, you don't have to use the time remap. There are methods to just go into the camera F curve or keep putting the camera inside of nulls, and then you can have an easier time applying speed ramps to each null without it over dominating another. I did not want to bother with that. In my mind, it was logical. I thought this was going to be the fastest way to do this, and this was under a deadline, so I had to pull it off really fast. And I didn't want to keep meddling around with too many curves. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to make it one curve, and I'm going to be in control of the timing of the whole scene. I'm not going to have to keep going into every light and trying to update it and trying to, change it whenever I would change how the phone was animated or how the camera was animated. So I would recommend that you learn more about the retime function, time track in Cinema 4D. It would be very valuable if you're into any sort of animation, products animation, or even characters. So we're at the 30-minute mark here, so I have to hurry, and let's see. Is there anything important that I didn't explain? The cubes are very simple. You can animate the cubes in a linear way and then just assign the retime ramp curve that you come up with, assign it to the cubes, and they're gonna move following that same timing, and it's gonna look good because the cubes are gonna move aggressively when the camera moves aggressively, and it just kind of all looks smooth and it all comes together in the end. So that's it for the lighting and the animation. This is not a detailed, bit by bit tutorial. This is more of just a general breakdown / just going through the scene, because these kinds of scenes, it would take a very long time to recreate and try to explain them in the traditional tutorial way. However, I will make sure to clean up the project and make everything organized in folders so that it's easier to understand, and I'm gonna upload it to my Patreon. So if you're interested in opening this up on your own system and checking it out, you can do that by becoming a member of the Patreon. It's going to be in the description. I'm planning to do more tutorials in the very near future. Quickly, one specific material that I didn't talk about, which I think deserves some time in the tutorial, is the material of the glass cubes, and mainly because it's actually, well, not the most straightforward thing, because as you can see, the cube here is behind the one above it, and it creates a very nice diffused see-through texture. And you're gonna notice the same thing for this cube over here. In fact, if I can pull up the original high quality animation, and you're gonna be able to see it way clearly. So here, this side and this side, and it's actually very easy. I believe I used the same texture, the same material for these two, and a slightly different one for this one, just to kind of force this effect specifically, because if I assign the same texture to this one on the front, it's gonna be too thick. It's not gonna allow you to see through what happens in the back. So let me explain it really fast. No textures assigned to it. It's simply 0.6 weight of reflection, 0.2 roughness to create that nice diffuse, so that it's not just, you know, sharp reflection, sharp shadow, and all of that. So 0.2 in the roughness, and then transmission is 1 all the way, so it's completely transmissive. 0.3 roughness, which adds to, in fact, this is what this is what affects the sharpness of the objects that happen to be behind or happen to be refracted by the objects here. So if I build it up all the way to 1, you're not going to be able to see what's behind it. So 0.3 was a nice sort of balance. And then dispersion is 58, and I believe this is not really needed. This might have given me just a little bit more detail in the final render, where actually, you know, everything is rendered in a relatively higher quality, and it just gives it a little bit more of a chromatic aberration to whatever's behind it. It's not necessary at all. It probably just bumped up the render time unnecessarily, which I can just show you the render settings really fast. Open the EXR 16-bit as always. I always go with this format. There's a very low-key LUTs here. Not sure if you can just download this from the internet. I'm not sure, but it's going to be included with the project files in the Patreon, and pretty low threshold for a pretty high quality. I didn't use denoising. That's very interesting, because I thought I did, because it takes a while to render out the full detail of these translucent cubes. But I probably thought, hey, it's the main focus, one of the main key things about this animation is the translucent blocks. So, you know, might as well just not really go, you know, cheap on the quality and just bump it up. So I guess I didn't use denoising. But I would recommend you probably go for denoising and maybe 0.01. This is probably going to render faster. It's going to be less expensive if you use a render farm, and you're probably not going to be able to really tell the difference. This is mainly because this was used for, you know, actual like production level work, which requires very high quality. Obviously, it was for Xiaomi India's socials, so you can't cut too many corners. Motion blur 7 for a good quality motion blur, and 50 is on the lower end. So you're only really gonna notice the motion blur if there's very strong, very fast movements, and I think it's the most obvious when the phone rotates around. and perhaps when it moves up like this aggressively, and then when it rotates, you can see there's a little bit of motion blur, but not too much. Did not want to make it, look too blown out. And this is basically just straightforward, just default settings. And that's it for the render settings.